The hostess glanced at his faded jeans, then looked right through him. Cole Harrison stood at the entrance of the packed restaurant, his 7-year-old daughter Penny clutching his calloused hand. Couples in silk dresses and tailored suits brushed past them. Got seated immediately. 15 minutes. 20. Still no table. The manager watched from across the room. She saw everything. She did nothing. But there was something about this quiet man she couldn't quite read. Something in the way he observed every detail, every slight, with eyes that revealed nothing. When he finally stood up from the worst table in the house, his calm voice cutting through the clinking glasses and polite laughter, every fork stopped moving. Every conversation died. No one in that room was prepared for what came next. The Friday evening crowd at Bellini's had reached its peak. Crystal chandeliers cast warm amber light across white tablecloths and polished silverware. The air hummed with conversation, the clink of wine glasses, and the subtle piano melody drifting from the corner. Waiters in crisp black vests glided between tables, their movements choreographed like dancers in a well-rehearsed show. This was the kind of restaurant where reservations were made weeks in advance, where business deals were sealed over $100 steaks, where appearances mattered more than appetite. The hostess stand near the entrance served as the first checkpoint, and the young woman behind it had become an expert at reading customers in seconds. Designer bags, Rolex watches, Italian leather shoes. These were the signs she looked for. The signals that determined how warmly she smiled, how quickly she moved. Cole Harrison pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside with his daughter. The cool autumn air followed them briefly before the warmth of the restaurant swallowed it whole. He wore clean but simple clothes, a navy blue button-down shirt tucked into well-worn jeans, work boots that had seen better days. His hands were rough, the kind of hands that knew labor, that had built things and fixed things and carried heavy loads. Penny walked beside him in her favorite yellow dress, the one with small white flowers that her grandmother had given her last Christmas. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, tied with a ribbon that matched her dress. She looked around the restaurant with wide eyes, taking in the elegant surroundings like a visitor to a palace she had only seen in picture books. The hostess, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a practiced smile, looked up as they approached. Her eyes moved quickly from Cole's face to his clothes, to his boots, and something in her expression shifted. The smile remained, but lost its warmth, becoming a mask rather than a welcome. She glanced down at her reservation book, though they both knew she was not actually checking anything. Behind them, the door opened again, and a couple in their 50s entered, the woman draped in a fur coat, the man wearing a suit that probably cost more than Cole's monthly mortgage payment. The hostess's entire demeanor transformed. Her smile brightened, her posture straightened, and she stepped around the podium to greet them personally. Cole watched this happen without changing his expression. He had seen it before, many times, in many places. The subtle dance of judgment that occurred in spaces where money determined worth. He felt Penny's hand tighten around his fingers, and he gave her a gentle squeeze of reassurance. They waited. The couple in expensive clothes was escorted to a prime table near the window, the one with the view of the city lights and the fresh flowers in a crystal vase. The hostess returned to her podium, and Cole stepped forward again. His voice was calm and polite when he spoke. He asked for a table for two, mentioned that his daughter was hungry after a long day. The hostess nodded without meeting his eyes and told him there would be a wait. She did not say how long. She did not offer them a seat in the waiting area. She simply turned her attention to the next group coming through the door. Rosa Whitmore stood near the bar, her position giving her a clear view of the entire dining room. At 34, she had worked her way up from server to manager over 8 years at Bellini's, and she took pride in running a tight ship. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, and her charcoal blazer fit perfectly over a cream silk blouse. She noticed the man and his daughter the moment they entered. She watched the hostess's dismissive treatment. She saw them standing there, waiting, while other guests were seated ahead of them. A small voice in the back of her mind told her to intervene, to fix this obvious inequity. But then her attention was pulled to Table 12, where a group of executives from Henderson Financial were celebrating a major acquisition. They were spending over $3,000 tonight, and their happiness was her priority. She would deal with the situation at the door later. There was always time to smooth over small problems. 23 minutes passed before the hostess finally acknowledged Cole and Penny again. She gathered 2 menus and led them through the restaurant, weaving past the good tables, past the decent tables, past even the acceptable tables. They stopped at a small 2-top tucked against the wall near the kitchen entrance. The constant swing of the door sent waves of heat and noise in their direction. The table wobbled slightly on uneven legs. The chairs had small tears in their leather seats that had been crudely patched. From this position, they could not see the piano or the windows or any of the elegant decor that made Bellini's famous. They could see the bathroom hallway and the busboy station. The hostess set down the menus without a word and disappeared before Cole could thank her. Penny looked at the table, then at her father. Her earlier excitement had faded, replaced by confusion, and something that looked dangerously close to shame. She was old enough to understand that they had been treated differently, young enough to not understand why. Cole pulled out her chair and helped her settle in, then took his own seat across from her. He picked up a menu and opened it, his expression neutral, almost serene. Inside, a slow anger was building, but he had learned long ago to keep such things contained. He had brought his daughter here for a reason, had chosen this restaurant specifically, and he would see the evening through to its conclusion. Whatever that conclusion might be. 10 minutes passed. No water. No bread. No server appeared to take their order or even acknowledge their existence. Penny kept looking toward the other tables, watching families receive baskets of warm bread, watching servers pour water with practiced precision, watching children her age coloring on paper menus with crayons provided by attentive staff. She turned back to her father, and her voice was small when she asked why no one was coming. Cole reached across the table and took her hand. He told her that sometimes people got busy, that they should be patient. But even as he said the words, he knew they were not entirely true. Patience was a virtue, but so was dignity. And right now, both were being tested. Rosa noticed them again as she crossed the dining room. The father and daughter at table 31, the worst table in the house. They had been there for nearly 15 minutes without service. She saw the little girl looking around with that particular expression children wear when they sense something is wrong. Rosa felt a twinge of guilt that she quickly suppressed. She would send someone over soon. But first, she needed to check on the Henderson group, make sure their dessert wine was properly chilled. She walked past table 31 without stopping, though she felt the father's eyes follow her briefly. Another 10 minutes crawled by. Penny had grown quiet, her earlier chatter about school and her friends, and the book she was reading replaced by a heavy silence. She kept fidgeting with the ribbon in her hair, a nervous habit Cole had noticed developing over the past year. The kitchen door swung open behind them, releasing a burst of steam and the clatter of dishes being stacked. A busboy rushed past with a heavy tray, nearly bumping Cole's chair. No apology, no acknowledgement. They were invisible in a room full of people, ghosts seated at a table no one wanted to see. Cole looked at his daughter's face, at the way her shoulders had curved inward, at the way she avoided looking at the other diners. This was not the lesson he had wanted her to learn tonight. Or perhaps it was exactly the lesson, just not delivered the way he had planned. Rosa finally approached their table, and the shift in atmosphere was immediate. She carried 2 glasses of ice water on a small tray, her movements graceful and professional. Her smile was polished, but automatic. The kind that had been practiced in mirrors and perfected over years of customer service. She apologized for the delay as she set the glasses down, explaining that they were experiencing an unusually busy evening. Her words were smooth, rehearsed, lacking any genuine warmth. Peak hours always created challenges, she said. They appreciated their patience. A server would be with them shortly. Cole listened to this performance without interrupting. When she finished, he simply nodded and thanked her for the water. His tone was neutral, neither cold nor warm. Rosa hesitated for a moment, something about his calm demeanor throwing her off balance. Most customers who had been treated this way would be visibly angry by now, demanding to speak with management, threatening bad reviews. This man simply sat there, watching her with eyes that seemed to be recording everything. She noticed things about him now that she had missed before. The way he held himself, straight-backed and composed. His hands were working hands, yes, but his watch was a simple classic design that suggested understated taste. And his daughter, despite her obvious discomfort, had impeccable manners. Rosa found herself wanting to understand why this unremarkable-looking man made her feel like she was the one being evaluated. But the thought was interrupted by a wave from table 12. The Henderson party needed something. She excused herself and walked away. Penny took a small sip of water, then looked up at her father. She asked if they could leave, her voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them spoke aloud. Cole studied his daughter's face for a long moment. She was so much like her mother, the same gentle eyes, the same quiet strength that could be mistaken for timidity by those who did not look closely enough. He thought about the evening he had planned, the lessons he had hoped to teach, the point he had intended to make, and he thought about his daughter's dignity, which mattered more than any lesson, more than any point, more than anything else in the world. He told her they would stay a little longer. He wanted her to see something important. She did not ask what. She simply nodded and picked up her menu again, trusting him as she always did. The Henderson party at table 12 had grown louder as the evening progressed, their laughter carrying across the dining room with the entitled confidence of people who had never been told no. One of the men had sent his steak back twice. Rosa stood nearby, her smile fixed in place, absorbing their complaints with practiced grace. When the man made a crude comment about the young server, Rosa laughed politely and promised to have a word with the staff. Inside, she felt something twist. This was the job. This was how the world worked. From across the room, Cole watched this exchange. He saw Rosa's smile, saw the way she accepted the man's rudeness as though it were perfectly normal. He looked at Penny, who was watching a family at a nearby table receive a birthday cake, complete with sparklers and singing waiters. Her expression was wistful. Rosa noticed Penny's raised hand from across the room. The little girl had been trying to flag down a server for several minutes, her small arm waving politely each time someone passed. No one stopped. No one even slowed down. Rosa watched this happen once, twice, 3 times. Each time, the girl's hand lowered a little more slowly, her hope diminishing in visible increments. A server brushed past their table carrying a tray of expensive cocktails to the Henderson party. Another server followed with a platter of appetizers, worth more than some families spent on groceries in a week. Neither acknowledged the child's attempts to get their attention. Rosa felt that twist in her chest again, stronger this time. She took a step toward their table, then stopped. The Henderson party was waving for her again. They needed something, always needed something, and their needs came first. She turned away from table 31 and walked in the opposite direction. Penny's hand dropped to her lap. She looked at her father with eyes that had grown bright with tears she was fighting to hold back. Her voice cracked when she spoke, asking if they could please go home now. She said she was not hungry anymore. The words landed like stones in Cole's chest. He had spent years building a life that protected his daughter from moments like this, years ensuring she never felt less than anyone else. And here, in this overpriced restaurant with its crystal chandeliers and its white tablecloths, she was learning a lesson he had never wanted to teach: that some people were seen and others were not. That worth could be measured in the quality of your clothes, that a child's hunger mattered less than a rich man's whim. Rosa heard the words. She was only a few steps away, having paused to adjust a centerpiece on a nearby table. And the girl's broken request reached her clearly. "Please, Daddy, can we go home?" The words echoed in her mind, colliding with memories she had spent years trying to forget. A younger version of herself, sitting in a welfare office with her mother, watching well-dressed people get helped while they waited for hours. A school cafeteria where she had eaten free lunch in secret, ashamed of what it meant. 100 small humiliations that had shaped her into someone who understood, deeply and personally, what it felt like to be invisible. She looked at the little girl in the yellow dress, at the father who sat so still and calm, and something cracked inside her. But the crack sealed itself quickly, covered over by years of survival instinct. She could not afford to feel this. She had worked too hard to get where she was. She turned and walked toward the Henderson party, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like a countdown to something none of them could see coming. Cole reached across the table and took both of his daughter's hands in his. He spoke quietly. His words meant only for her. He told her that what was happening here was not about them. It was about fear. The fear some people had of anyone different from themselves. He told her that her worth was not determined by how others treated her, that she was valuable and important and loved beyond measure. He told her that sometimes the world showed you its ugliness, so you could recognize beauty when you found it. Penny listened to her father's words, her tears drying slowly as his steady voice wrapped around her like a blanket. She did not fully understand everything he was saying. But she understood the most important part. He was there. He would always be there, and nothing that happened in this restaurant could change that. The clock on the wall showed nearly 90 minutes since they had arrived. In that time, they had received water and nothing else. No bread, no server, no acknowledgment that they were paying customers deserving of basic respect. The Henderson party had finished their meal and were now enjoying after-dinner drinks, their voices carrying across the room in waves of self-satisfied laughter. Other tables had turned over twice, guests arriving and departing, while Cole and Penny remained frozen in place like forgotten decorations. The servers continued to flow around them, a river of efficiency that somehow never touched their small island of neglect. This was not an accident. This was a choice, made over and over again by everyone in the room, and choices, Cole knew, had consequences. He pushed back his chair and stood up. The movement was slow and deliberate, drawing no immediate attention from the bustling room. He straightened his shirt, adjusted his collar, and took a deep breath. Penny looked up at him with questioning eyes, unsure of what was happening. He gave her a small smile, the kind that told her everything would be okay, and then he turned to face the dining room. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud. It did not need to be. There was something in its tone, a quality of absolute authority that cut through the ambient noise like a blade through silk. He asked for the room's attention. Just those words, simple and calm, but they carried a weight that made the piano player pause mid-note. Conversation stuttered and stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Servers froze in mid-step. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as every eye turned toward the man standing at the worst table in the house. Rosa felt her heart stop for a single terrifying beat. She knew, with the instinct of someone who had spent years managing crisis situations, that something significant was about to happen. She began moving toward him, her mind racing through possible scenarios and responses. A complaint. A scene. A bad review that could damage the restaurant's reputation. She was already composing apologies and offers of complimentary meals when Cole began to speak again. He introduced himself and his daughter. His voice remained calm, conversational almost, as though he were chatting with friends rather than addressing a room full of strangers. He explained that they had arrived 90 minutes ago, hoping to enjoy a nice dinner together. He described the wait at the door, the table they had been given, the complete lack of service they had received. His words were precise and factual, lacking any trace of anger or self-pity. He was simply telling a story, sharing an experience, letting the facts speak for themselves. The diners listened in uncomfortable silence, some avoiding his gaze, others watching with the morbid fascination of witnesses to an accident they could not look away from. Rosa had reached the edge of the dining room, close enough to intervene but suddenly unsure if she should. She wanted to stop him, to smooth this over, to make the awkwardness disappear. But something held her in place. Maybe it was the way he spoke, with such measured dignity. Maybe it was the little girl sitting at the table, watching her father with an expression of quiet awe. Or maybe it was the feeling growing in Rosa's chest, the crack widening again despite her efforts to keep it sealed. She listened as Cole continued, his words landing like carefully placed stones, building something she could not yet see. Cole paused and looked down at his daughter. When he spoke again, his voice softened, but it still carried to every corner of the silent room. He said that his daughter had asked him why no one would come to their table. He said she had asked if they could leave because she was not hungry anymore. He said those words had broken his heart in ways he could not describe. Then he turned to face the room fully, his gaze sweeping across the sea of uncomfortable faces. He asked them to consider what his daughter had learned tonight, that her value as a human being could be measured by the clothes she wore, that she was less deserving of basic courtesy than someone with a designer handbag, that in a room full of adults, not a single person thought she was worth acknowledging. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the Henderson party had stopped their laughing. Rosa felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes, tears she had not shed in years. She thought about the little girl in the yellow dress, thought about herself at that age. Her throat tightened as the weight of her choices pressed down on her shoulders. She had seen, she had known, and she had done nothing. Cole reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather folder. He opened it and removed a business card, holding it up so the room could see. His voice shifted then, taking on a harder edge that made several people flinch. He said he had come here tonight for a reason beyond dinner. He said he had wanted to see how this restaurant treated people who did not look like they belonged. He said he had his answer. The card identified him as Cole Harrison, founder and majority shareholder of Harrison Hospitality Group, the company that owned Bellini's, the company that owned 17 other restaurants across 3 states, the company whose name was printed on Rosa's paycheck every 2 weeks. The gasp that rippled through the room was almost comical. The hostess went pale as milk. Several servers dropped their professional masks, their faces revealing naked fear. The Henderson party exchanged confused glances, their earlier confidence evaporating. And Rosa, standing at the edge of the dining room, felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She had prided herself on knowing the important people, on recognizing the faces that mattered. She had built her career on that skill, and she had failed in the most spectacular way possible. Cole turned to face her directly. His eyes met hers across the crowded room, and in that gaze, she saw not anger, but disappointment. It was worse than anger. He walked toward her slowly, his footsteps measured on the hardwood floor. When he stopped in front of her, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He told her he had watched her all evening. He had seen her notice them, seen her hesitate, seen her turn away again and again. He said she wasn't a bad person. She was someone who had forgotten something important. Rosa could not speak. Her carefully constructed composure had shattered completely, leaving her exposed and vulnerable in a way she had not felt since childhood. She thought about all the decisions she had made tonight, all the small choices that had seemed so reasonable at the time. Each choice had been logical, defensible, aligned with everything she had been taught about success. And each choice had been wrong. She had chosen profit over people. She had chosen silence over courage. And a little girl in a yellow dress had paid the price. Cole turned back to face the room one final time. His voice returned to its earlier volume, clear and strong, and carrying to every corner. He said that tonight had been a test, one he had hoped they would pass. He said that every person in this room had a choice in how they treated others. He said that power was not measured by the size of your wallet, but by the kindness in your heart. He looked at Penny, who had stood up from her chair and was walking toward him with quiet dignity. He said his daughter had shown more grace tonight than anyone else in the room. She had been patient when patience was undeserved. She had been polite when politeness was not returned. She had been brave when bravery was hard. He was proud of her. He would always be proud of her. Penny reached her father's side and slipped her hand into his. She looked up at him with eyes that held no tears now, only a fierce love that transcended the evening's difficulties. He squeezed her hand gently and then addressed Rosa one more time. He told her that he would not be firing anyone tonight. He said that punishing people for one bad evening was not his way. But he said changes would be coming to how this restaurant operated. Changes in training, changes in culture, changes in what was valued and rewarded. He said he hoped she would be part of those changes because he believed she understood, deep down, why they mattered. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, his daughter at his side, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Rosa watched them go. She watched the heavy glass door swing closed behind them, watched the cold autumn air rush in briefly before the warmth of the restaurant swallowed it again. She stood there for a long moment, aware of the eyes on her, aware of the whisper starting to circulate. The Henderson party was asking for their check. Their earlier arrogance completely deflated. Servers were looking at each other with expressions of shock and dawning realization. The hostess had disappeared, probably to the bathroom to cry or compose herself or both. And Rosa remained frozen in place, her mind replaying the evening's events with the brutal clarity of hindsight. She thought about the man who had stood in front of her, the one she had dismissed as unimportant. She thought about all the signals she had missed, all the opportunities she had squandered. She thought about the girl in the yellow dress, the one who had reminded her so much of herself. And she thought about the choice that lay before her now, the same choice that lay before everyone in the room. They could return to business as usual, could pretend this night had never happened, could continue valuing the wrong things for the wrong reasons. Or they could change. They could look at themselves honestly and decide to be better. They could remember that every person who walked through that door, regardless of their clothes or their wallet, deserved basic dignity and respect. The evening continued around her. Tables needed clearing. Guests needed serving. The machinery of the restaurant demanded attention and maintenance. But something had shifted in the air, something subtle but undeniable. The servers moved differently, with a new awareness in their eyes. The remaining diners spoke more quietly, their earlier casual cruelty replaced by something approaching reflection. And Rosa stood at the center of it all, feeling the weight of her choices and the possibility of redemption. She thought about what Cole had said, about being part of the changes to come. She thought about the little girl's broken voice asking to go home. She thought about her own younger self, sitting in that welfare office, learning lessons about worth and value that had taken decades to unlearn. Cole and Penny walked through the parking lot toward their modest sedan. The autumn wind carried the smell of falling leaves and distant rain. Penny looked up at her father as they walked, her yellow dress bright against the gray evening. She asked him if he was sad. The question surprised him, made him stop and kneel down to her level. He asked why she would think that. She said because the people in the restaurant had been mean to them. Cole looked at his daughter and felt his heart swell with love. He told her that he was not sad. He told her that tonight had been important, that she had been brave, that he was proud of her. They reached the car and Cole helped Penny into her booster seat, making sure her seatbelt was secure before closing the door. He walked around to the driver's side and paused for a moment, looking back at the restaurant's glowing windows. Inside, he knew conversations were happening. Decisions were being made. People were examining their actions and finding them wanting. That was the point of tonight's exercise, the real reason he had chosen to come here incognito rather than as the boss everyone would recognize and defer to. He had wanted to see the truth, the unfiltered reality of how his restaurant treated people, and the truth had been ugly. But ugly truths could be the foundation for beautiful change if people were willing to do the work. Rosa finally moved from her spot near the bar. She walked slowly toward the hostess stand, her mind still processing the evening's revelations. The young hostess had returned, her eyes red-rimmed, but her composure mostly restored. She looked at Rosa with something like fear, expecting blame or punishment or both. Instead, Rosa simply asked her name. The hostess said she was Jessica, that she had been working there for 3 months. Rosa nodded and then did something that surprised them both. She apologized, not for what had happened tonight specifically, but for the culture that had made it possible. She said that they had lost sight of something important, all of them, and that starting tomorrow, things would be different. Jessica blinked in confusion, clearly unsure how to respond, but Rosa was already walking away, moving toward the kitchen to speak with the staff, to begin the long process of rebuilding something that had been broken far longer than just one evening. The drive home was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Penny had fallen asleep within the first few minutes, her head tilted against the window. Cole drove through familiar streets, past houses with warm lights in their windows. He thought about his late wife, about how she would have handled tonight. She had always been better at these things, more patient, more forgiving. He hoped he had done her justice tonight. When they pulled into the driveway of their modest home, Penny stirred awake. Cole helped her out of the car and carried her inside. He brought her to her room and tucked her into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin the way she liked. She looked up at him with drowsy eyes and said she had a question. He told her to ask. She wanted to know if they could go back to that restaurant someday, after things got better. Cole smiled and told her yes. When things got better, they would go back. He kissed her forehead and whispered goodnight. Back at Bellini's, the evening was winding down. Rosa had gathered the staff in the back room for a brief meeting. She told them about the evening's events, for those who had not witnessed them directly. She told them about the changes that would be coming, the new emphasis on treating every customer with equal respect. She said that the measure of a restaurant was not in its profit margins, but in how it made people feel. Some of the servers nodded in agreement. Others looked skeptical. But all of them listened, which was a start. Weeks passed. Changes came to Bellini's slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. New training programs were implemented. The hostess stand developed a new protocol, one that ensured wait times were based on actual availability rather than perceived worth. Rosa found herself thinking about Cole Harrison often, about the way he had spoken, about the dignity he had maintained, even while exposing the restaurant's failures. She thought about his daughter, about the yellow dress and the ribbon in her hair. She hoped they were doing well. She hoped they would return someday so she could show them what their evening had accomplished. 3 months later, a letter arrived at the Harrison home. It was handwritten on Bellini's stationery, the elegant script carefully formed. Rosa thanked Cole for what he had done, not the public confrontation, but the private mercy. She said his choice not to fire anyone had given her a second chance she was not sure she deserved. She described the changes at the restaurant, the new training, the new culture, the new sense of purpose among the staff. She said that a little girl in a yellow dress visited her thoughts often, reminding her of why hospitality mattered. She hoped, someday, they might return so she could serve them properly. She signed it simply, Rosa. Cole read the letter at his kitchen table while Penny ate her breakfast. He folded it and slipped it into his pocket. Then he asked Penny if she remembered the restaurant they had visited a few months ago. She said she did. He asked if she would like to go back, to see if things were different now. Her face lit up with that particular joy only children could express. Pure and uncomplicated. She said yes. She wanted to see if the lady in the pretty jacket was still there. They returned on a Saturday evening, arriving without fanfare or announcement. Rosa spotted them the moment they walked through the door, recognition flooding through her with an almost physical force. She crossed the dining room with quick steps, her heart pounding in her chest. She greeted them by name, told them how honored she was that they had returned. She led them personally to the best table in the house, the one by the window with the view of the city lights. And when Penny looked up at her with those bright, curious eyes and said she liked her pretty jacket, Rosa felt something break open inside her, something warm and healing. The dinner that followed was everything a dinner should be. The food was excellent, the service impeccable, the atmosphere welcoming and warm. But more than that, there was a feeling of connection, of humanity, of people seeing each other as fellow travelers rather than categories to be sorted. And when the evening ended, when the bill was settled and the goodbyes were said, Rosa thanked them again for everything they had taught her. Cole and Penny walked out into the cool evening air, their hands linked together, their hearts full. The autumn had deepened since their last visit, the leaves now mostly fallen, the early hints of winter carrying on the wind. Penny asked her father if he was happy now. He said he was. She asked if the lady was happy too. He said he thought so. She nodded with the satisfaction of someone who had seen a problem solved, a wrong righted, a story brought to its proper conclusion. Some stories end with dramatic revelations or shocking twists. This one ended with something quieter, but no less powerful. A father and daughter sitting at a good table in a restaurant that had learned to see them. A manager who had remembered something important about human dignity. Change came not in thunderbolts, but in small moments, in individual decisions, in the courage to stand up, and the grace to forgive. And in a yellow dress hanging in a little girl's closet, a dress she had almost learned to associate with shame, there was now a different memory attached. A memory of her father's voice, calm and strong, speaking truth to a room that needed to hear it. A memory of courage that looked like kindness. A memory of a night when she learned that her worth wasn't determined by how others treated her, but by how she treated herself. She would carry that lesson with her always. It was the greatest gift her father could give her. The knowledge that she mattered, the certainty that she was loved, the understanding that standing up for dignity, her own and others, was always worth doing. Always.